With her twins, lips turning blue in her frozen arms, Sarah's salvation appeared in the doorway, an Apache warrior her town had taught her to fear. The community that abandoned her now hunted them both through knee-deep snow, determined to ensure their forbidden alliance would end in blood. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Montana Territory, winter of 1873. The wind howled like a wounded animal, scraping its claws against the thin wooden walls of Sarah Blackwood's cabin. Snowflakes, sharp as splinters, pelted the frost-covered windows while darkness settled over the valley like a shroud. Inside, the feeble glow of a dying fire cast long shadows across the rough-hewn floor, barely warming the small space that had become both sanctuary and prison. Sarah's hands trembled as she wrapped another layer around her week-old twins. The cloth was thin, worn from too many washings, but it was all she had left. Her breath formed clouds in the frigid air as she tucked the fabric around their tiny bodies, their faces pinched and reddened from the cold. "Hush now, my loves," she whispered, her voice cracking from exhaustion. Just a little longer. But even as the words left her lips, Sarah knew they were empty promises. The woodpile had dwindled to nothing more than a few split logs and broken branches. The last of the food, a handful of dried beans and a crust of stale bread, had been consumed 2 days ago, and no one was coming to help them. She glanced at the door, still bearing the crude warning carved into the wood by the men from Rivercrest Settlement. Debtor. Traitor, Indian lover. The words had been accompanied by stony faces and cold eyes as they'd informed her that her late husband's debts were now hers to bear. That his questionable associations and rumors about her own heritage made her unwelcome in their God-fearing community. That had been 4 days ago, just before the blizzard descended from the mountains like God's own judgment. "Your papa would have known what to do," Sarah murmured to the babies, blinking back tears that threatened to freeze on her cheeks. Thomas had been gone 3 weeks now, his body laid in the frozen ground with only the most cursory of prayers from the town preacher. The official story was that bandits had caught him on the trail home, but Sarah knew better. She'd seen the look exchanged between Sheriff Wilson and Judge Harmon at the hasty funeral. Thomas hadn't been killed for the meager coins in his pocket. He'd been silenced for speaking against the treatment of the Apache people being driven from their lands. A cry, thin and desperate, rose from the bundle in her arms. Little Emma, always the louder of the twins, was hungry again. Beside her, James slept fitfully, too weak even to protest his empty stomach. "I know, sweet girl," Sarah soothed, rocking gently. "And I know." She shifted Emma to her breast, wincing as the baby latched on. There was so little milk left. Her own body, deprived of food and warmth, was failing them all. Outside, the wind changed direction, sending a fresh assault of snow and ice against the north wall. The cabin shuddered under the impact. From the corner where the roof had begun to leak, a steady drip of melted snow had formed a small puddle on the floor. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to summon her remaining strength. She was 26 years old, the daughter of a trapper and a mother who had died before revealing much about her own Shoshone ancestry. She had survived mountain winters before, had hunted and trapped alongside her father until his death 5 years ago. She was not someone who gave up easily. But now, with Thomas gone and 2 helpless infants depending on her, Sarah felt the cold hand of defeat creeping up her spine. A particularly violent gust rattled the door on its hinges, and Sarah's eyes snapped open. The fire had died to glowing embers, casting the cabin into near darkness. She needed to add more wood, but to do so meant setting the babies down on the cold floor. The choice was impossible. Let the fire die completely, or risk exposing the twins to the deadly chill for those few critical moments. With a deep breath, Sarah made her decision. Carefully placing the infants in the center of her bed, she wrapped them in every available cloth, her shawl, a threadbare quilt, even the dress she had been saving for spring. Then, moving as quickly as her exhausted body would allow, she crossed to the woodpile and gathered the remaining logs in her arms. The wood was damp, reluctant to catch. Sarah knelt before the hearth, blowing gently on the embers, coaxing the flames back to life with whispered pleas and the last of her strength. When a small flame finally licked at the edge of a log, she nearly wept with relief. "See," she called softly to the twins. "My we'll be warm again soon." But as she turned back toward the bed, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The room tilted sideways, the rough walls and ceiling spinning in a nauseating circle. Sarah stumbled, reaching for the table to steady herself, but her fingers found only empty air. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was the distant howl of a wolf, or perhaps something else, carried on the bitter wind that had no mercy for abandoned widows or orphaned children on the Montana frontier. Outside, the blizzard raged on, erasing paths and boundaries, burying the tracks of both man and animal beneath its unforgiving white blanket. And somewhere in that swirling chaos of ice and darkness, fate was already changing course, drawing an unlikely savior toward the small cabin and its dying occupants. For even in the cruelest winter, the most unexpected warmth can sometimes be found. The Apache called this moon the Hunger Moon, when game grew scarce and the spirits of the weak were tested against winter's brutal embrace. Lone Fox knew its cruelty well. 10 days had passed since he'd separated from his scattered band, driven north by the relentless pursuit of blue-coated soldiers who cared little whether they captured or killed those they called hostiles. He moved like a shadow through the blinding snow, each step deliberate despite the exhaustion that weighed on his powerful frame. At 30 winters, Lone Fox had earned the respect of his people through patience and wisdom rather than reckless bravery. The scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw told the story of lessons learned in blood when he was younger and less cautious. The storm had caught him crossing the valley that the white settlers called Blackwater Basin. It was a place his people avoided, not from fear, but from the bitter knowledge that too many Apache bones already lay beneath its soil, left unburied after a massacre 3 summers past. Lone Fox pulled his buffalo hide closer around his shoulders, narrowing his eyes against the stinging snow. He had been tracking deer since dawn, following the faint impressions of hooves that the blizzard was rapidly erasing. His provisions had dwindled to a small pouch of pemmican and a handful of dried berries, not enough to sustain him through another 3 days of this weather. "And Grandfather Sky," he murmured in his native tongue, "if I am to join my ancestors this night, let it be with dignity." The wind seemed to answer, shifting direction suddenly and carrying with it a scent that made Lone Fox pause. Smoke, faint but unmistakable. He lifted his head, instincts honed by years of survival instantly alert. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant people. And people, in this territory, usually meant danger for a lone Apache warrior. Prudence dictated he change course, avoid whatever settlement or camp lay ahead. The cavalry from Fort Davidson had patrols even in this weather, and settlers in these parts were known to shoot Indians on sight, asking questions only after blood soaked the snow. But something, perhaps the same instinct that had kept him alive when others fell, pulled him toward that distant promise of warmth. He adjusted his course, moving with the silent grace that had earned him his name among his people. The snow grew deeper as he descended into a small hollow nearly to his knees in some drifts, No ordinary traveler could navigate such conditions, but Lone Fox had fashioned crude snowshoes from bent branches and rawhide, distributing his weight across the treacherous surface. As he crested a small rise, he caught sight of it, a small cabin, nearly buried on its northern side by snowdrifts. A thin wisp of smoke rose from its stone chimney, but even from this distance, Lone Fox could tell it was the dying gasp of a fire rather than the steady breath of a well-tended hearth. He paused, scanning the surrounding area for signs of other dwellings or travelers. Nothing. This cabin stood alone, separated from whatever settlement it belonged to, vulnerable in its isolation. Drawing closer, Lone Fox noticed other troubling signs. No fresh tracks around the door, no wood stacked nearby, no light visible through the single small window. Abandoned, he thought, or soon to be a grave. He had seen enough death in his 30 years, had caused enough of it when forced to fight for his people's survival. Something in him rebelled at the thought of walking away from whatever struggle was playing out inside those wooden walls. Moving with increased urgency but no less caution, Lone Fox approached the cabin's door. Years of conflict had taught him never to enter any white man's dwelling without assessing every possible threat. He circled once, noting the poorly maintained roof, the chopped wood scattered and now buried beneath the snow, the absence of livestock or outbuildings. This was no prosperous homestead, but a place of hardship, perhaps even poverty. The wind changed again, and with it came a sound that pierced through Lone Fox's practiced detachment, a child's cry, so faint it might have been merely the wind's deception. He froze, listening intently. There it was again. Not one child, but two distinct cries, weak but unmistakable. Any remaining hesitation vanished. With 3 swift strides, Lone Fox reached the door and found it secured only by a simple wooden latch. He lifted it carefully, mindful that even in this remote location, desperate settlers sometimes rigged traps for unwanted visitors. The door swung inward with a groan of frost-stiffened hinges, releasing a cloud of marginally warmer air. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the faint red glow of dying embers in the stone fireplace. What Lone Fox saw made even his battle-hardened heart constrict. A young woman lay crumpled on the rough plank floor, her dress thin and inadequate for the bitter cold. Her face, partially visible beneath a fall of dark hair, was pale as the snow outside, lips tinged with blue. And on the bed, wrapped in what appeared to be every available cloth in the humble dwelling, 2 impossibly small infants squirmed and whimpered, their cries growing weaker even as he watched. He murmured, a prayer of thanks to the spirits that had guided his steps to this place, mixed with an acknowledgement of the gravity of what he had found. Lone Fox knew in that moment that everything had changed. The cavalry hunting him, the settlers who feared and hated his kind, the long journey back to his scattered people, all of it would have to wait. For now, there was only this. A mother who had fallen in her desperate attempt to keep her children alive, and 2 tiny lives flickering like the embers in the hearth, moments away from being extinguished by the merciless cold. He stepped fully into the cabin and closed the door against the howling wind, sealing his fate with that of the 3 souls whose path he had been destined to cross. Lone Fox moved with practiced efficiency, his mind cataloging priorities even as his hands began their work. First, the fire. Without warmth, nothing else would matter. He knelt by the hearth, examining the meager supply of wood that remained. Not enough. Never enough. With swift, decisive movements, he shrugged off his pack, retrieving a small leather pouch. From it, he extracted dried moss and shavings of resinous pine bark. Fire-starting materials he had carried close to his body. keeping them dry despite the blizzard. Carefully arranging the damp logs to maximize their burn, he coaxed the dying embers with gentle breaths, adding his tinder bit by bit. The flames responded, flickering weakly at first, then with growing confidence. Satisfied the fire would hold for now, Lone Fox turned his attention to the woman. He approached cautiously, aware that even unconscious, she represented unknown danger. White women had been taught to fear his kind above all others. If she woke suddenly, her screams might be heard by passing travelers, or worse, she might have a weapon hidden within reach. But the shallow rise and fall of her chest told him she had little strength for either. Kneeling beside her, Lone Fox pressed 2 fingers against her neck, feeling for the pulse his people called the spirit drum. It beat faintly, irregularly. "You fight still," he murmured in his language. "Good." With careful hands, he lifted her from the floor. She weighed almost nothing, her body light as a young deer's in his arms. He placed her on a wooden chair near the growing fire, close enough for warmth, but not so near as to shock her system. Next, the infants. Their cries had subsided to whimpers, a sign Lone Fox recognized all too well from winters when his people had faced starvation. He moved to the bed, unwrapping the layers just enough to assess them. 2 tiny faces, eyes closed, cheeks sunken. A boy and a girl, their skin bearing the unmistakable bluish tint of dangerous cold. Not yet frozen, but perilously close to slipping beyond recovery. Lone Fox made his decision without hesitation. Opening his buffalo hide coat, he lifted both infants and placed them against his chest, their small bodies nestled against the warmth of his skin. He wrapped the coat around them all, creating a pocket of heat fueled by his own life force. "Breathe," he commanded softly, rocking slightly in the ancient rhythm that mothers of all peoples seem to know instinctively. "Breathe and stay." One of the babies, the girl, stirred first, her tiny mouth opening in a reflexive search for nourishment. Her brother remained still, but Lone Fox felt the faint flutter of heartbeat against his skin. For nearly an hour, he remained thus, dividing his attention between maintaining the fire, warming the infants, and watching the woman for signs of returning consciousness. Outside, the blizzard intensified, wind screaming around the cabin's corners like vengeful spirits. It was the smell of meat that finally penetrated Sarah Blackwood's darkness. Her eyelids fluttered, consciousness returning in painful increments. First came sensation, warmth on her face, the hard edge of a chair beneath her, the insistent ache of her milk-heavy breasts. Then sound, the crack and pop of a fire much stronger than she remembered, the muffled howl of wind, and something else, a low, rhythmic humming that belonged to no lullaby she knew. Finally, her eyes opened, the world swimming into focus through a haze of exhaustion. The scream built in her throat died instantly when she saw what occupied the space beside her hearth, an Indian, tall even while seated cross-legged on her floor. His black hair hung in 2 long braids adorned with small carved beads. The firelight played across features that seemed carved from weathered copper, high cheekbones, a straight nose that had clearly been broken at least once, and eyes so dark they reflected the flames as tiny dancing points of light. But it was what he held that froze Sarah's breath in her lungs, her babies, her twins, cradled against his bare chest inside a buffalo coat wrapped around them all like a cocoon. "And no," she whispered, the word escaping before she could stop it, her body tensed to lunge forward, maternal instinct overriding all reason. The warrior's eyes met hers, steady and unblinking. He made no threatening move, no gesture toward a weapon. Instead, with slow deliberation, He unwrapped one side of his coat, revealing the infants nestled safely against him. "They live," he said in accented but clear English. Being cold was killing them. Sarah stared, uncomprehending. Her mind, still sluggish from her collapse, struggled to reconcile the scene before her with everything she had been told to fear. Indians killed settlers. They took scalps. They stole children. They did not save them. "My babies," she managed, her voice cracking. "Please." Understanding flickered in the warrior's eyes. With careful movements, he shifted the twins in his arms, then extended them toward her. "Take them," he said simply. "They need mother's milk." Sarah's arms shot out, gathering her children close. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she counted fingers and toes, examined small faces, assured herself they were unharmed. To her astonishment, both infants felt warm, warmer than they had been before her collapse. Their breathing seemed stronger too, their tiny chests rising and falling with renewed determination. "You saved them," she said. The words half question, half stunned realization. The warrior didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rose to his feet in a fluid motion and moved to the fireplace, where a small metal cup suspended over the flames contained what appeared to be melted snow mixed with something dark. "A drink," he said, offering her the cup. "Broth will help milk come." Sarah hesitated, suspicion warring with desperate thirst and hunger. "If wanted to harm," the warrior said with unexpected gentleness, "would not have made fire, would not have warmed children." The simple logic of this statement penetrated Sarah's fear. She shifted the twins to one arm and accepted the cup with her free hand. The liquid was thin but savory, some kind of meat broth with herbs she didn't recognize. "Thank you," she said after drinking deeply. The warmth spread through her chest, awakening sensations other than cold and fear for the first time in days. "Who are you?" The warrior regarded her steadily, seeming to weigh how much to share. "Lone Fox," he finally said, touching his chest. "Apache." Sarah's eyes widened. Apache. The very tribe Thomas had defended in town council meetings. The people the cavalry from Fort Davidson had been driving north and west with increasing violence. "I'm Sarah," she replied, then nodded down at her babies. "This is Emma and James." Lone Fox nodded once, accepting the introduction. Then he moved toward the door, retrieving an ice-crusted leather bag she hadn't noticed before. "Storm grows worse," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "Need more wood, food." He glanced at the nearly empty shelves, the bare floor where a root cellar door suggested storage below. "You have nothing." It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway, a flush of shame coloring her pale cheeks. "The town. They stopped bringing supplies after my husband died, said his debts were unpaid." She swallowed hard. "Said other things too." Understanding darkened Lone Fox's features. He had seen how white settlements treated their own when they showed kindness to his people. "I will find what we need," he said simply, fastening his coat. "You stay by fire. Feed children." Before Sarah could protest, before she could warn him about the patrols, about the danger he faced, about the impossibility of finding anything in the raging blizzard, he had slipped out the door, leaving behind only a swirl of snowflakes and the lingering warmth where he had sat. Sarah looked down at her twins, now rooting hungrily against her. As she adjusted her dress to feed them, a strange sensation took root alongside her fear and uncertainty, something that felt dangerously like hope. The blizzard had transformed the world into a swirling void of white. Lone Fox moved through it like a spirit, his body angled against the wind, eyes narrowed to slits. The cold bit through his layers of hide and wool, but he welcomed the pain. It kept his mind sharp, his senses alert. Finding wood was his first priority. Without heat, the woman and her children would not survive another night. He circled the cabin, searching for anything the storm hadn't completely buried. Behind the structure, he discovered the remains of an old shed, partially collapsed under the weight of snow and neglect. Perfect. Working methodically, Lone Fox broke apart the weathered planks, stacking them in a makeshift sled fashioned from his blanket. The nails he saved, tucking them into a pouch at his waist. Metal was always valuable, especially in places where traders rarely ventured. As he worked, his mind tracked back to the woman, Sarah. The name felt strange on his tongue, but he repeated it silently, acknowledging her as more than just another white settler. She was a mother fighting for her children's lives. This Lone Fox understood and respected, regardless of the color of her skin or the history between their peoples. Her situation puzzled him, however. A young woman, alone with newborn twins in the dead of winter, abandoned by her own kind. It spoke of circumstances beyond mere poverty. The carved words on her door had confirmed his suspicions. She was an outcast, perhaps even considered a traitor. Food would be harder to find than wood. Game would be sheltering from the storm, and Lone Fox knew his usual hunting methods would be hampered by the whiteout conditions and howling wind. Still, he had not survived 30 harsh winters by surrendering to impossibility. After securing enough wood to last several days, he ventured farther from the cabin, moving in ever-widening circles. His trained eyes caught what others would miss, the slight depression beneath a pine tree where snow had been disturbed, the barely visible tracks leading to a hollow log. It took nearly an hour of patient stalking before he found what he sought. A snowshoe hare huddled in a shallow burrow beneath the twisted roots of a fallen oak. The animal was thin, but its meat would provide vital nourishment. With practiced precision, Lone Fox's knife found its mark. Swift, merciful, he whispered thanks to the spirit of the creature that would sustain others with its sacrifice. The hare secured to his belt, Lone Fox turned his attention to the surrounding forest. Plants that most whites overlooked as useless weeds often held medicine and sustenance. Despite the snow, he managed to locate wintergreen leaves, pine needles for tea, and even a cluster of dried chokecherries still clinging to their branches, small treasures that might spell the difference between starvation and survival. As he gathered these findings, a sound carried on the wind made him freeze mid-motion. Voices, men's voices, distant but approaching. Lone Fox melted into the shadow of a large pine, becoming as still as the trunk against which he pressed his back. His hand moved instinctively to the knife at his belt, his only weapon since losing his rifle during his escape from the cavalry 3 weeks earlier. Through the curtain of falling snow, he caught glimpses of movement. 3 riders, their horses struggling through the deep drifts. The men wore heavy coats, scarves wrapped around their faces against the biting cold. Not military, settlers, then, or perhaps trappers. "Waste of time in this weather," one was saying, his words barely audible above the wind. "Sheriff said check all outlying cabins," another replied. "Make sure no one's harboring that Apache war party." "War party?" The third laughed harshly. "More likely frozen red bastards by now. No one could survive out in this. Tell that to the folks at the Henderson place. 3 men dead, scalped clean. That wasn't Apaches. That was white men wanting it to look like Apaches." "Shut up, Davis. You sound like that fool Blackwood before he got himself killed." Lone Fox's muscles tensed at the mention of the name. Blackwood, the woman's husband, surely. The pieces began to fit together in his mind. A man who had spoken in defense of the Apache, who had perhaps challenged the narrative being spread about his people. A man who had died under suspicious circumstances, leaving his wife vulnerable just as she was about to give birth. The riders moved closer, and Lone Fox calculated his options. He could remain hidden, wait for them to pass. But if they were checking outlying cabins, Sarah's would certainly be on their route. The sight of an Apache warrior in her home would be a death sentence for them both, and likely for the infants as well. No, he could not allow these men to reach the cabin. With silent determination, Lone Fox circled through the trees, keeping the riders in sight while ensuring they did not detect his presence. He moved parallel to their course, searching for an opportunity to divert them. Fortune favored him when the lead rider's horse stumbled in a hidden depression, nearly unseating its rider. The men halted, cursing the weather and their mission. "This is madness," the one called Davis complained. "We've checked Erickson's place and the old Miller cabin, both empty. No one's out this way except that Blackwood woman, and she's probably dead by now." "Orders are orders," the first man grunted, adjusting his scarf. "To hell with orders. I'm not dying out here to check on a woman the town already left for dead." Davis turned his horse. "The pass to the north will be closing soon. I say we report we checked everything and head back before we join her." The other men hesitated, clearly torn between duty and self-preservation. Lone Fox held his breath, willing them to choose retreat. After a moment of tense silence, the leader nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but if the sheriff asks, we say we tried to reach the Blackwood place, but the snow was too deep." "Fine by me," Davis replied, already turning his mount. "But not like anyone's going to venture out here to prove otherwise until spring thaw." The men wheeled their horses around, heading back toward what Lone Fox presumed was Rivercrest settlement. He remained motionless until they were well out of sight, their voices swallowed by the howling wind. Only then did he exhale slowly, the tension draining from his body. The encounter had confirmed what he already suspected. Sarah Blackwood had been deliberately abandoned, left to die, along with her newborn children. And her husband's death had been no accident. These white men, so quick to accuse his people of savagery, had committed an act that even the most hardened Apache warrior would find dishonorable. To leave a mother and her babies to die slowly of cold and hunger violated the most basic laws of humanity. Lone Fox gathered his collected supplies, securing them more tightly for the return journey. The storm showed no signs of abating, but his steps were swift and certain as he navigated back toward the cabin. He had been gone longer than intended, and though Sarah had seemed stronger when he left, he knew the twins required constant care. As the cabin came into view through the swirling snow, Lone Fox felt an unfamiliar emotion settle in his chest. Not just responsibility, he had borne that weight many times before as a warrior and protector of his band. This was something more personal, more complex. This woman and her children, strangers though they were, had become his concern in a way that transcended duty. He paused at the threshold, brushing snow from his coat and stamping his feet to avoid bringing the deadly cold inside with him. Then, balancing his precious cargo of wood and provisions, he pushed open the door to the small world that now held lives intertwined with his own by the strange workings of fate. Sarah startled at the sound of the door opening, instinctively pulling the twins closer to her chest. The hours of Lone Fox's absence had stretched like years, each minute feeding her fear that he might not return, or worse, that others might come instead. Relief flooded her face when the Apache warrior stepped inside, bringing with him a blast of cold air and the promise of survival bundled in his arms. Snow clung to his dark hair and shoulders, melting rapidly in the relative warmth of the cabin. "You came back," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Lone Fox regarded her steadily as he set down his makeshift sled of wooden planks. "When I said I would," he spoke simply, as if the notion of breaking his word was incomprehensible. Sarah watched as he efficiently organized his findings, the wood stacked by the hearth, the small game laid on the table, and various plants and berries arranged with care. His movements were precise, economical, revealing a lifetime of wilderness survival. "How are the little ones?" he asked, glancing at the twins nestled against her. "Would better," Sarah replied, looking down at her children with cautious hope. "They've both eaten, even James, who was so weak before." Her voice trailed off, the memory of how close they had come to death still raw. Lone Fox nodded, satisfaction evident in the slight relaxation of his shoulders. He knelt by the fire, adding wood with careful attention to maintaining the perfect balance between conservation and necessary heat. "I heard men," he said without turning around, "riders from your settlement." Sarah's breath caught. "Here, they came here." "No." Lone Fox arranged the last log. "They turned back. Storm too strong," they said. A bitter laugh escaped Sarah's lips. They weren't coming to help anyway. Now he did turn, dark eyes studying her face. "They spoke of your husband. Called him Fool Blackwood." Sarah's expression hardened, grief and anger mingling in her pale features. "Because he spoke the truth. Because he wouldn't stay silent while they—" She stopped, suddenly uncertain how much to reveal to this man who was still, despite everything, a stranger. "While they hunted my people," Lone Fox finished for her, his voice even, not accusatory, merely stating a fact they both knew. A tense silence filled the small cabin, broken only by the occasional crack of burning wood and the soft breathing of the twins. The fire cast long shadows across the rough walls, creating a pocket of warmth that felt suspended in time, separate from the hatred and violence that raged beyond its boundaries. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Thomas, my husband. He was a surveyor for the railroad company. He traveled through Apache territories often." She shifted Emma to her other arm. "He said your people were being forced from lands promised to them in treaties. Said the attacks on settlements were because whites kept breaking their word." Lone Fox's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or surprise at hearing such words from a white woman's lips. "The town council called it treason," Sarah continued. "The local paper stopped printing his letters. Then 3 weeks ago, he went to Fort Davidson to speak with the commander there." Her voice caught. "They said bandits killed him on the trail home, but there was no blood money taken, no supplies stolen, just Thomas shot through the heart. And you with child," Lone Fox observed softly. "And dot convenient timing for those who wished him silent." Sarah looked up sharply, struck by how precisely he had articulated her own unspoken suspicions. "Yes," she whispered, "very convenient." Lone Fox rose and moved to the table, retrieving the hair he had caught. With deft movements, he began to skin and clean it, his hands never hesitating despite the grim conversation. "What will you do?" he asked. "Or when storm ends?" It was a question Sarah had asked herself repeatedly during the lonely days after Thomas's death. Before the blizzard, before her abandonment, she had considered traveling east to her cousin in Pennsylvania. But the winter journey with newborn twins would have been dangerous, even with proper supplies and transportation. "I don't know," she admitted. "The town made it clear I'm not welcome." The cabin isn't even ours. It belongs to the mining company Thomas worked for before the railroad. Lone Fox nodded, absorbing this information. And the children's grandparents. Thomas's parents died years ago. Mine. Sarah hesitated. My father was a trapper. He raised me alone after my mother died. But he's been gone 5 years now. She didn't mention what Thomas had suspected, that her mother had been at least partly Shoshone, explaining Sarah's slightly darker complexion and the whispers that had followed her even before her marriage to a sympathizer. "What about you?" she asked suddenly, surprising herself with her boldness. "Why are you alone, separated from your people?" Lone Fox continued his work, quartering the meat with practiced efficiency. For a moment, Sarah thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low, tinged with a controlled anger that ran deep. "Cavalry attacked our winter camp, killed many, women, children, elders." His jaw tightened. "We scattered. Some went south, toward mountains, others west. I led soldiers away from the main group, then lost them in canyon lands." He gestured toward the north. "Was trying to find safe passage back when storm came." Sarah absorbed the stark tragedy behind his economical words. "I'm sorry," she said, knowing how inadequate the sentiment was against such loss. Lone Fox looked up, studying her face as if searching for insincerity. Finding none, he gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Your husband," he said after a moment, "he was good man, to speak truth when others wished for lies." "He was," Sarah agreed, her throat tightening, "the best man I've ever known." A comfortable silence fell between them as Lone Fox finished preparing the hare, setting portions to cook slowly over the fire. The rich aroma soon filled the cabin, making Sarah's stomach clench painfully with hunger. As if sensing her discomfort, Lone Fox retrieved something from his pouch, a small handful of dried berries. "Eat these first," he instructed, placing them beside her. "Stomach needs to remember food slowly." Sarah accepted the offering, popping a berry into her mouth. The tart sweetness exploded on her tongue, making her eyes water with simple pleasure. "Thank you," she said, the words encompassing far more than just the berries. Lone Fox's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Children are a gift from Creator," he said, glancing at the twins. "All children. Apache way teaches they belong to future, not to past hatreds." The simple wisdom of his statement struck Sarah deeply. How different from the venomous rhetoric she had heard in town, the newspaper editorials calling for extermination of hostile savages, the sermons preaching that Indians were soulless heathens. Here was a man who had every reason to hate her kind, who had lost family and friends to white men's bullets, yet had not hesitated to save her children from certain death. Little James stirred in her arms, his tiny face scrunching in discomfort. With practiced gentleness, Sarah shifted him to her shoulder, patting his back soothingly. To her surprise, Lone Fox approached, holding out his hands in silent question. After only a moment's hesitation, Sarah carefully transferred her son to the warrior's arms. Lone Fox cradled the infant with unexpected tenderness, speaking softly in his native language as he rocked James with a natural rhythm. The baby settled almost immediately, his small body relaxing into the secure hold. "What are you saying to him?" Sarah asked, watching in wonder. Lone Fox's expression remained solemn, but a warmth had entered his dark eyes. "The old Apache blessing," he explained, "for children born in winter moon, says they will have strong hearts, like trees that bend but do not break beneath snow's weight." Outside, the blizzard continued its assault, snow piling ever higher against the cabin walls. But inside, in the small circle of firelight, something rare and fragile was taking root, understanding reaching across the chasm of suspicion and hatred that had divided their worlds. As night settled over the frozen landscape, Sarah felt an emotion she had not expected to experience again. Hope, small but persistent, like the first green shoot after a devastating fire. 3 days passed, each one bleeding into the next, with no clear demarcation beyond the slight strengthening of grey light that filtered through the frost-covered windows at what passed for dawn. The blizzard showed no signs of relenting, its fury seemingly inexhaustible as it howled around the small cabin like a living thing. Inside, life had settled into a rhythm of necessity. Lone Fox maintained the fire, prepared meals from their meager supplies, and ventured out briefly when the wind occasionally lessened to check his snares or gather more wood. Sarah tended to the twins, who grew stronger with each passing day, their thin cries becoming more insistent, more alive. They spoke little at first, each wrapped in private thoughts, communicating mainly through gestures and brief exchanges about immediate needs. But as the hours stretched and the isolation deepened, words began to flow more freely. "My father taught me to read the stars," Sarah said on the evening of the third day, breaking a long silence as they sat before the fire. The twins slept nearby in a makeshift cradle Lone Fox had fashioned from a wooden crate padded with furs. "He said a woman alone should always know how to find her way." Lone Fox nodded, his hands busy fashioning new snares from twine and wire he'd salvaged from around the cabin. "Wise man," he commented. "Apache children learn stars before they learn to speak. Sky is oldest map." "What's your favorite constellation?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the normalcy of the question, as if they were simply two people sharing conversation, not survivors thrown together by desperate circumstances. Lone Fox paused his work, considering her question with the same seriousness he seemed to give everything. "The Seven Sisters," he finally answered. "Pleiades. My people say they are daughters of first woman who watch over mothers giving birth." Sarah smiled, her hand instinctively moving to touch the sleeping form of little Emma. "They were watching over me, then?" "Yes," Lone Fox agreed solemnly. "They brought me to your door." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with implications neither was prepared to fully examine. Before Sarah could respond, a sharp crack from above shattered the moment. Both looked up as a second crack followed, louder and more ominous. "The roof," Sarah whispered, fear edging her voice. Lone Fox was already on his feet, his expression grim. Too much snow, weight-breaking supports. Another crack, and a fine shower of ice crystals and dirt sifted down from a corner of the ceiling. The sound of splitting wood filled the small space, drowning out even the constant moan of the wind. Sarah lunged for the twins, gathering them into her arms as they began to wail, disturbed by the sudden movement and tension. "We must brace it," Lone Fox said, quickly assessing the structure, "or whole roof will collapse." He moved with decisive efficiency, dragging the table to the center of the room and upending it. "Need wood," he instructed, pointing to the planks he'd salvaged from the shed. "And rope, anything to tie with." Sarah placed the twins back in their cradle and rushed to help, ignoring the pain in her still healing body. She found a coil of rope in a trunk, along with strips of leather her husband had used for repairs. Together, they worked frantically, Lone Fox constructing a hasty support system, while Sarah handed him materials and held pieces in place. The crack widened, snow beginning to drift through the opening, but the Apache warriors' experienced hands never faltered. Using the table as a central support, he extended the salvage planks upward to brace the sagging portion of roof. With quick, complex knots, he secured everything in place, creating a makeshift buttress that groaned under the pressure but held. Only when the last rope was tied did he step back, breathing heavily from the exertion. "We'll hold for now," he said, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold that now permeated the cabin through the damaged roof. "But we must clear snow or it will break again." Sarah nodded, already pulling on her worn coat. "I'll help," Lone Fox gave her an appraising look. "You are still weak from birthing, and you can't do it alone," she countered, wrapping a scarf around her head. "The twins will be fine by the fire for a few minutes. We'll work quickly." After a moment's consideration, Lone Fox nodded. "Stay close. Blizzard can blind you in seconds." Outside, the full fury of the storm assaulted them. The snow had drifted nearly to the roofline on the north side of the cabin, creating a dangerous weight that threatened to collapse the entire structure. Working side by side, they began to clear it away. Lone Fox showing Sarah how to cut blocks of compacted snow and slide them away from the building. The wind tore at their clothing and skin, ice crystals stinging exposed flesh like tiny knives. Sarah's fingers quickly grew numb despite her mittens, and her lungs burned with each frigid breath. But she worked on, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. At one point, a particularly violent gust nearly knocked her from her precarious position. Lone Fox's hand shot out, steadying her with a firm grip on her arm. Their eyes met briefly through the swirling white, his concerned, hers grateful, before they returned to their urgent task. It took nearly an hour of grueling labor before Lone Fox finally signaled they had done enough. By then, Sarah was trembling with exhaustion, her lips blue with cold. He guided her back to the door, one hand remaining supportively at her elbow. Inside, they found the twins still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger that had threatened their shelter. The fire had died down during their absence, and the cabin had grown considerably colder. Sarah immediately checked on her children while Lone Fox rebuilt the fire. "You are strong," he said unexpectedly as flames began to lick at the fresh logs. Many would have surrendered to such conditions. Sarah looked up, surprised by the compliment. "I have no choice," she said simply. "They need me." She nodded toward the twins. "There is always choice," Lone Fox countered. "Even in dying, some choose to go quietly. Others fight until last breath." He regarded her steadily. "You are a fighter." The observation warmed something in Sarah that had nothing to do with the rekindled fire. "So are you," she replied softly. Later, as they shared a meager supper of rabbit stew, carefully rationed to extend their provisions, Sarah found herself studying Lone Fox's face in the firelight. The stern lines of his features had become familiar over the past days, no longer foreign or frightening. She noticed details she had missed before, a small scar near his right eye, the way one corner of his mouth lifted slightly when he spoke of his people, the gentleness of his hands when he checked on the twins. "What will you do?" she asked suddenly, "when the storm passes?" Lone Fox set down his bowl, his expression turning inward. "Find my people," he answered after a moment, "or what remains of them. And if the soldiers are still searching for you," a shadow crossed his face, "then I will lead them away from the others again." The simple courage of his statement struck Sarah deeply. Here was a man willing to sacrifice himself for his band, to draw danger away from those who could not defend themselves. "What of you?" he asked, turning the question back to her. Where will you go when snow stops?" It was the question that had haunted Sarah through sleepless nights. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "Not back to Rivercrest, that's certain." "The next settlement, Fort Davidson," Lone Fox suggested, though his tone indicated he already knew these were not viable options. Sarah shook her head. "The fort is 3 days' journey by wagon in good weather. Impossible with infants in winter." She stared into the flames, confronting the stark reality of her situation. "And the next settlement is Harrisville. They'd just send me back to Rivercrest, or worse, turn me over to the sheriff for my husband's debts." Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken truths. They were both outcasts, he hunted by the cavalry, she rejected by her own community. The temporary sanctuary they had created within these walls could not last. "There is a place," Lone Fox said finally, his voice thoughtful. "Valley beyond northern mountains. Some of my people may have gone there. Old trading place where different tribes meet in peace." He hesitated, then added, "Some white trappers come there too. Not soldiers or settlers, men who live by different rules." Sarah looked up, a fragile hope kindling in her eyes. "How far?" 5, maybe 6 days' journey. In good weather." He gestured toward the window, where snow still pelted the glass. "In this, longer, and dangerous for little ones. More dangerous than staying here until our food runs out, until the roof collapses completely, until the town decides to check on me after all." Sarah's voice rose slightly with each question, the full precariousness of their position suddenly overwhelming her. Lone Fox reached across the space between them, his hand coming to rest lightly on her arm, the first time he had deliberately touched her beyond necessity. The gesture was clearly meant to calm, to reassure. "We will find way," he said, the "we" hanging in the air between them, like a promise neither had intended to make. Sarah's eyes met his, seeing not an enemy, not even simply an unexpected ally, but a man who had chosen to share her fate when he could have walked away. A man who had held her children against his heart to warm them back to life. "Yes," she whispered, her free hand moving to cover his where it rested on her arm. "We will." Outside, the blizzard raged on, erasing boundaries, reshaping the landscape. But within the cabin's fragile shelter, something else was being reshaped. Perceptions, beliefs, the very definitions of us and them that had seemed so immutable only days before. Dawn broke with unfamiliar silence. Sarah opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented by the absence of wind's constant howl. The quality of light filtering through the frost-laced window was different too, clearer, almost golden, instead of the diffuse grey that had pervaded the past 4 days. She sat up slowly, careful not to disturb the twins nestled beside her. Across the cabin, Lone Fox was already awake, standing motionless at the window, his silhouette outlined against the brightening sky. "The storm?" she asked, her voice husky with sleep. "Passed in night," he replied without turning. "Sky is clear." Something in his tone made Sarah rise and join him at the window, pulling her shawl tightly around her shoulders. She gasped softly at the transformed landscape. The world outside had been reborn in pristine white, sculpted into flowing curves and sharp ridges by the wind's artistic hand. The rising sun cast long blue shadows across the snow, and the air was so clear that distant mountains, previously hidden by the blizzard, now stood in sharp relief against the horizon. "It's beautiful," she breathed, the sight momentarily lifting the weight of their predicament. Lone Fox nodded once. "Beautiful," he agreed. "And dangerous." Sarah understood his meaning immediately. The storm's passing meant visibility had returned for them, but also for anyone searching the territory. Cavalry patrols would resume. The men from Rivercrest might finally make good on their duty to check the outlying cabins. "How long before the snow melts enough for travel?" she asked. Lone Fox studied the terrain with experienced eyes. "Not melt, will freeze harder first, makes walking possible with snowshoes." He glanced at her. 3 days, maybe 4, before we could attempt journey. "And if someone comes before then?" The question hung between them, laden with implications neither wanted to face directly. Lone Fox turned from the window, his expression grave. "Then we must be ready," he said simply. "Pack what we can now. Be prepared to leave quickly if necessary." Sarah nodded, mentally cataloguing the cabin's meager supplies. Thomas's old rucksack could carry provisions. There were blankets to wrap the twins, a small cooking pot, matches, the remaining food. "We'll need something to carry the babies," she mused aloud. "And something that leaves my hands free and keeps them warm." Lone Fox considered this, then moved to the corner where he'd placed his own pack. From it, he withdrew a tightly folded bundle of hide and sinew that Sarah hadn't seen before. With practiced movements, he began to unfold and shape it. "Cradleboard," he explained as he worked. "Apache women carry children this way. Can be strapped to back, keeps baby warm, protected." Sarah watched in fascination as the seemingly simple pieces came together into an ingenious carrier, complete with a protective hood and secure bindings. "It's perfect," she said, genuine appreciation in her voice. "But there's only one, and I have 2 babies." Lone Fox's hands stilled for a moment. "I will carry one," he said, as if it were the most natural solution in the world. "You carry other." The simple statement left Sarah momentarily speechless. This man, this Apache warrior whom the townspeople of Rivercrest called savage and merciless, was not only helping her escape, but offering to bear the responsibility of one of her children during a dangerous winter journey. "Thank you," she managed finally, the words wholly inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. Lone Fox acknowledged her thanks with a slight nod, then continued his work. "Need second one," he said practically. "Can make from materials here." He glanced around the cabin. "Hide from bed, perhaps. Wood from table." The rest of the morning passed in focused preparation. While the twins slept, Sarah gathered and organized supplies. Food, clothing, Thomas's old compass and map, a small knife she found in a drawer. Lone Fox fashioned a second cradleboard, slightly cruder than his own but functionally similar, and repaired his snowshoes while constructing a simple pair for Sarah from branches and leather strips. Around midday, as Sarah nursed the twins near the fire, Lone Fox abruptly stiffened, his head turning toward the window like a wolf scenting danger. "What is it?" Sarah asked, immediately alert. He raised a hand for silence, moving soundlessly to the window. After a moment of intent observation, he turned back, his expression tense. "Smoke," he said. "From direction of settlement." Sarah's heart stuttered. "How far?" "Still distant, but moving this way." Lone Fox's gaze swept the cabin, assessing their readiness with military precision. "We are not prepared yet." Fear and frustration warred in Sarah's chest. They were so close to being ready, but not close enough if riders were already approaching. The twins were stronger, yes, but still fragile. The temperature outside was bitter, the snow deep. "Could they be passing by?" she asked, clutching at hope. "Following another trail." Lone Fox's expression remained grave. "Possible, but unlikely." He moved to the door, checking his knife. "I will scout." "See how fast they approach." Alarm shot through Sarah. "No, if they see you." "They will not see me," he interrupted with quiet confidence. "But we must know what comes." Before she could protest further, he had slipped on his coat and was out the door, closing it softly behind him. Sarah stared at the rough wooden planks, suddenly feeling more vulnerable than she had during the height of the blizzard. With deliberate calm, she continued their preparations, wrapping the dried meat in cloth, filling a water skin, and packing everything as securely as possible into Thomas's rucksack. All the while, her ears strained for any sound of approach, hoofbeats, voices, or the return of Lone Fox himself. Nearly an hour passed before the door finally opened again, bringing with it a blast of cold air and Lone Fox's imposing figure. His face was grim as he stamped snow from his boots. "5 riders," he reported without preamble. "Armed, following trail to cabin, will be here before sunset." Sarah's arms tightened instinctively around the twins. "Who are they? Cavalry?" "No. Men from settlement. One wears star." Lone Fox removed his coat. His movements precise, controlled. "Sheriff." The word fell like a stone in Sarah's stomach. Sheriff Wilson had been Thomas's most vocal opponent in town, the man who had sneered most openly at her husband's Indian-loving speeches. "Did they see you?" she asked. Lone Fox shook his head. "But they know someone is here. Saw smoke from chimney." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, calculating, "How long do we have?" 3 hours, maybe less. It wasn't enough time. Not nearly enough to finalize preparations for a journey that would challenge even experienced travelers, let alone a weakened woman with newborns. "We can't leave," she said, the realization settling like ice in her veins. "Not yet. The twins wouldn't survive." Lone Fox's dark eyes met hers, understanding and resolve mingling in their depths. "Then I must go," he said quietly. "If they find Apache warrior here, they will shoot first." "Ask questions never." "No!" The word burst from Sarah with surprising force. "If you leave now, in this cold, where would you go?" "I have survived worse," he said simply. "And if they track you, if they follow your trail from here?" Sarah's mind raced ahead, seeing the deadly outcome. "They'll hunt you down. They're looking for someone to blame for everything. The Henderson killings, the missing cattle from the Peterson ranch. They'll say you're part of that war party they're so convinced is hiding in these hills." Lone Fox remained silent, neither confirming nor denying her assessment. But Sarah saw in his eyes that he had already reached the same conclusion. "There must be another way," she insisted, desperation edging her voice. For a long moment, the only sound in the cabin was the soft crackling of the fire and the occasional whimper from little Emma. Then Lone Fox's expression shifted subtly, a decision visibly taking form. "There is one possibility," he said slowly, "but it requires trust." "I trust you," Sarah replied without hesitation, surprising herself with the absolute certainty of her words. Something flickered in Lone Fox's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or a deeper emotion she couldn't name. He moved closer, kneeling beside her so they were at eye level. "They come looking for widow woman alone," he said, his voice low and intent. "What if they find something else instead? Something that makes them uncomfortable enough to leave quickly?" Sarah frowned, not understanding. "What do you mean?" "Your husband defended Apache. Town hated him for it." Lone Fox's gaze never wavered from hers. "What would they think of woman who takes Apache man into her home?" "Into her bed." Heat flooded Sarah's face as his meaning became clear. "You want them to think that we're—" "Yes." His expression remained serious, without a trace of impropriety. "Men like Sheriff, they fear mixing of blood more than anything, makes them see red, act without thinking. but also makes them turn away, not want to look too closely. You think they would leave rather than face such a situation? Sarah asked, the idea simultaneously shocking and strangely compelling in its audacity. Not just leave, Lone Fox clarified. Carry story back to settlement. Story so shameful few would want to return here. Give us time to prepare properly. Leave when twins are stronger. Sarah considered the plan, her practical mind working through its implications. It was outrageous, scandalous, and possibly their only chance. The town already believed the worst of her. Why not use their prejudice as a shield? It could work, she admitted slowly. But how do we convince them? They'll be suspicious, looking for tricks. A ghost of a smile touched Lone Fox's lips. Leave that to me, he said. Just follow my lead when they come. As he rose to his feet and moved toward the window to check the position of the approaching riders, Sarah found herself studying his profile with new awareness. The proud set of his shoulders, the quiet dignity in his bearing, the intelligence behind his careful words. He was not at all what she had been taught to expect from savages. And for the first time since Thomas's death, she felt something stir within her besides grief and fear, a recognition of strength, of honor, and perhaps something more complicated that she wasn't yet ready to name. The approaching hoofbeats reached Sarah's ears before the riders came into view. Each dull thud against the packed snow sounded like a hammer striking the final nails in a coffin. She stood by the window, twins bundled in her arms, watching the 5 men materialize from the tree line like grim specters. Sheriff Wilson led the group, his substantial frame wrapped in a buffalo coat, badge gleaming dully on his chest. Behind him rode Davis, the general store owner, Reverend Paulson, whose sermons had grown increasingly vitriolic against savages and their sympathizers, and 2 younger men Sarah recognized as the Burkett brothers, known for their hair-trigger tempers and unquestioning loyalty to the sheriff. "They're here," she whispered, though Lone Fox had undoubtedly heard the riders approach long before she had. He moved beside her, close enough that his arm brushed against hers. "Remember," he said softly, "follow my lead. Show no fear." Sarah nodded, her mouth too dry for speech. The plan they had hastily constructed seemed simultaneously outrageous and their only hope. She placed the twins in their makeshift cradle, adjusted her dress, and took a deep breath as the men dismounted outside. Heavy boots stomped on the porch, clearing snow. Then a sharp knock rattled the door. "Mrs. Blackwood," Sheriff Wilson's voice boomed. "Open up. It's Sheriff Wilson from Rivercrest." Lone Fox gave her a single nod. Sarah forced her feet to move, each step bringing her closer to a confrontation she had both dreaded and anticipated for days. With trembling fingers, she unlatched the door and pulled it open. Sheriff Wilson's florid face registered immediate shock as his gaze traveled from Sarah to the tall Apache warrior standing deliberately close behind her. His hand instinctively moved toward his holstered revolver. "Step aside, Mrs. Blackwood," he ordered, voice tight with tension. "There's an Indian in your cabin." "I'm aware, Sheriff," Sarah replied, willing her voice to remain steady. She did not move from the doorway. "This is Lone Fox. He saved my life and the lives of my children when the town left us to die in the blizzard." Wilson's eyes narrowed beneath bushy brows. "You're harboring a hostile, Mom. Could be one of the same savages that massacred the Henderson family. Step aside now." From behind her, Lone Fox's hand came to rest possessively on Sarah's shoulder. The gesture was calculated, deliberate in its implication. "She stays where she is," he said, his accented English clear and firm. "This is our home now." The effect was immediate. Confusion, then dawning comprehension, followed swiftly by disgust crossed the sheriff's face. Behind him, Reverend Paulson made a strangled noise of outrage. "Good God, woman," the Reverend sputtered. "And have you lost your senses entirely?" Sarah leaned slightly into Lone Fox's touch, playing her part with a conviction that surprised even her. "I've found them, Reverend," she replied. "Along with someone who values my life and my children's lives more than those who claim Christian charity." The Burkett brothers exchanged glances of revulsion, while Davis muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like whore. Sheriff Wilson's face had darkened to a dangerous shade of purple. "This is against nature," he growled. "Nay, and likely against the law." "What law, Sheriff?" Sarah challenged, finding courage in her righteous anger. "The same law that turned a blind eye when my husband was murdered. The same law that abandoned a woman and her newborn twins to freeze to death over unpaid debts." Wilson's jaw worked silently, fury rendering him momentarily speechless. Lone Fox chose that moment to step fully into view, his tall frame filling the doorway beside Sarah. Without a trace of submissiveness, he stared directly into the sheriff's eyes, a challenge that made the lawman flinch despite himself. "You have seen what you came to see," Lone Fox stated flatly. "Now go." "This ain't over," Wilson snarled, finding his voice. "Not by a long shot." "It is for today," Lone Fox replied with quiet certainty. "Unless you wish to shoot unarmed man in front of woman and babies." The implied accusation hung in the frigid air. Sarah knew, as did everyone present, that such a thing wasn't beyond the realm of possibility. Men like Wilson had killed Indians for far less than taking up with a white woman. But the presence of witnesses, even those sympathetic to his views, seemed to stay the sheriff's hand. The legal complications of murdering an Indian who had committed no verifiable crime in the home of a widow with infant children would be difficult to explain away, even in a frontier territory where justice often bent to accommodate prejudice. "Mrs. Blackwood," Wilson said finally, his voice cold as the surrounding snow, "your husband was a fool who died for his misguided principles. Seems you're determined to follow his example." He stepped back, gesturing to his companions. "Reverend, you were concerned about her spiritual welfare. I believe you have your answer." Reverend Paulson's thin lips pressed into a bloodless line. "No amount of prayer can save a woman who willingly lies with savages," he pronounced. "May God have mercy on your corrupted soul, Sarah Blackwood." Sarah felt Lone Fox's hand tighten slightly on her shoulder, a silent offering of support that gave her strength to meet the Reverend's sanctimonious gaze without flinching. "My soul is in God's hands, Reverend," she replied steadily. "As are my children, whom your Christian charity would have left to die in the cold." The 5 men retreated to their horses, muttering darkly among themselves. Sarah and Lone Fox remained framed in the doorway, maintaining their tableau of defiance until the riders had mounted and turned back toward town. Only when the last figure had disappeared into the trees did Sarah allow her shoulders to slump, the tension draining from her body so suddenly that she might have fallen if not for Lone Fox's supporting hand. "They believed," he observed quietly, guiding her back inside and closing the door against the biting cold. "Yes," Sarah whispered, moving immediately to check on the twins. "But now we've only made ourselves more of a target." "They'll be back, with more men, or a different excuse." Lone Fox nodded grimly. "We must leave before they return. 2 days, no more." He glanced toward the window, where the afternoon sun already hung low in the western sky. "They will tell others what they saw. Story will spread like fire in dry grass." Sarah knew he was right. By nightfall, everyone in Rivercrest would know that the widow Blackwood had taken up with an Apache savage. By tomorrow, the story would have grown in the telling, becoming even more scandalous, more threatening to the established order. Their deception had bought them time, but it had also sealed their fate. There could be no going back now, no possibility of reconciliation with the community that had already rejected her once. The Northern Valley lone fox had spoken of was no longer just a possibility, it was their only hope. Dawn painted the eastern sky in pale watercolors as Sarah took one final look at the cabin. In the 2 days since the sheriff's visit, she and Lone Fox had worked with single-minded focus, preparing for a journey that might well determine whether they lived or died. The cradle boards were completed, lined with rabbit fur and soft fabric salvaged from Sarah's threadbare quilt. Food had been packed with careful precision, dried meat wrapped in cloth, a small pouch of parched corn, pine nuts, and the last of the dried berries. Lone Fox had fashioned a sled from salvaged wood, a clever device to carry additional supplies without burdening either of them directly. Now, with the twins securely fastened into their carriers, Emma against Sarah's back, James against Lone Fox's, they faced the wilderness that stretched before them like an unwritten page. "Ready?" Lone Fox asked, his breath forming a cloud in the frigid morning air. Sarah nodded, adjusting the straps of her cradleboard one final time. She had no words for the complex emotions churning within her, fear of the unknown path ahead, relief at leaving behind the painful memories of rejection, grief for the life she had once envisioned, and something new, something that fluttered like a fragile hope when she looked at the man who had become her unlikely protector. They set out as the sun crested the horizon, their snowshoes leaving parallel tracks across the pristine expanse. The sled Lone Fox pulled behind him glided smoothly over the compacted snow, laden with their precious supplies and Thomas's old rifle, which they had found hidden beneath a loose floorboard, a final gift from her husband that might yet save their lives. The twins, bundled securely in their carriers, slept peacefully, lulled by the steady rhythm of their bearers' steps. Sarah marveled at how quickly they had adapted to this strange mode of transport, as if something in their blood remembered an ancestral wisdom their conscious minds could not recall. Lone Fox set a deliberate pace, steady enough to cover ground, but not so demanding that Sarah would exhaust her still recovering body. They moved northwest, following game trails when possible, breaking their own path when necessary. The snow-covered landscape offered few landmarks, but Lone Fox navigated with the confidence of one who read the sky and stars as easily as Sarah read printed words. "We follow Hanging Wolf River first," he explained, during a brief rest at midday. They sat on the sled, sharing a strip of dried meat torn into small pieces, then cut west at Medicine Rock. Less chance of meeting soldiers that way. Sarah nodded, trusting his knowledge of the terrain. Her own contribution to their survival came in other forms, nursing the twins during their stops, keeping track of their provisions, maintaining the small details that would prevent larger disasters. As the short winter day began to wane, Lone Fox led them to a cluster of large pines, their dense branches creating a natural shelter from both wind and prying eyes. With practiced efficiency, he began to construct a more substantial refuge, cutting lower branches to create a framework that he then covered with a piece of canvas from his pack. Sarah fed the twins while he worked, her back propped against a tree trunk. The simple act of nurturing her children in this wild place filled her with a fierce pride she had never experienced within the cabin's walls. Out here, with nothing but her own courage and Lone Fox's knowledge standing between her family and the elements, she felt strangely more alive than she had in months. "It's beautiful," she said softly, as Lone Fox knelt to build a small, nearly smokeless fire in front of their shelter. "I never realized how beautiful the world could be beyond settlements and fences." Lone Fox glanced up, something warming in his usually stoic expression. Apache believe beauty is everywhere," he replied. "In storm, in calm, in life, in death, all part of same circle." "Thomas believed something similar," Sarah mused, adjusting Emma at her breast. "He used to say that men built walls and borders because they feared the vastness of what they couldn't control." Lone Fox nodded, understanding in his dark eyes, "Your husband was wise man. Saw beyond what others trained themselves not to see." The simple acknowledgement of Thomas's values touched Sarah deeply. In Rivercrest, her husband's perspectives had been dismissed as naive at best, treasonous at worst. Here, spoken aloud in the wilderness, they seemed self-evident truths. They passed the night in surprising comfort, the small fire providing adequate warmth within their sheltered space. The twins slept between them, small bundles of miraculous life amidst the frozen world. Several times, Sarah woke to find Lone Fox's eyes open, vigilant even in rest, his hand never far from his knife. The second day brought heavier exertion as they began to climb into more rugged terrain. Sarah's muscles, still weak from childbirth and confinement, protested with increasing vehemence. By mid-afternoon, her steps had grown uneven, her breathing labored. "We rest," Lone Fox announced, his tone allowing no argument as he helped her to a fallen log. "I can keep going," Sarah insisted, even as her trembling legs betrayed her. "No!" His voice was firm but gentle. "Push too hard now. Collapse later, worse for everyone." He untied his cradleboard, carefully removing James and placing him in Sarah's arms. "Feed, son. I will scout ahead." As Sarah tended to the twins, Lone Fox disappeared among the trees with silent grace. She leaned back against the rough bark, closing her eyes briefly against the ache that seemed to have penetrated to her very bones. When she opened them again, Lone Fox was kneeling before her, his expression unusually animated. "Found something," he said. "Not far. Can you walk little more?" Curiosity overcame fatigue. Sarah nodded, securing the twins once more for travel. Lone Fox led her through a dense thicket that opened suddenly onto a small clearing. In its center stood a trapper's cabin, weathered and clearly abandoned for some time, but with its roof and walls intact. "Shelter," Lone Fox announced, satisfaction evident in his voice. Good place to regain strength before Mountain Pass." The cabin's interior was dusty but sound, containing a small stone fireplace, a crude table, and a platform bed frame. No sign of recent occupation was visible. Whoever had built this refuge had not returned in many seasons. "It's perfect," Sarah breathed, relief washing over her as Lone Fox helped remove her cradleboard. "How long can we stay?" 2 nights, he decided after consideration. "A rest tomorrow, continue next dawn." Those 2 days in the forgotten trapper's cabin became a sanctuary in their journey, a brief respite from the constant vigilance required by wilderness travel. Sarah's strength returned gradually as she rested, ate, and tended to her children in relative comfort. Lone Fox hunted successfully, returning with 2 snowshoe hares that replenished their dwindling meat supply. On the evening before their departure, as they sat before the small fire, Sarah found herself studying Lone Fox's profile. The firelight played across his strong features, softening the hardness that life had carved there. Without conscious thought, she reached across the space between them, her fingers lightly touching the back of his hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for finding this place, but for everything." I don't know why you've done all this for us, but I'm grateful beyond words." Lone Fox turned his hand, allowing her fingers to rest against his palm. The simple contact sent a warmth through Sarah's body that had nothing to do with the fire's heat. "In my language," he said after a moment, "there is word, Shilnju, means connection, between people, between person and land, between living and ancestors." His dark eyes held hers steadily. From moment I found you and little ones in snow, there was Shilnju, cannot explain better in English words." Sarah's heart quickened at both his touch and his words. This man, so different from anyone she had known, had become essential to her in ways that transcended mere survival. What had begun as desperate necessity had transformed into something she wasn't yet ready to name, but could no longer deny. "I feel it too," she whispered, honesty compelling her to acknowledge the invisible thread that had bound them together since that first night in the storm. The moment hung suspended between them, fragile as frost crystals on a spider's web. Then little Emma whimpered from her sleeping place, breaking the spell. Sarah withdrew her hand reluctantly, moving to tend to her daughter. They resumed their journey at first light, leaving the trapper's cabin as they had found it, save for a small pile of firewood Lone Fox had cut as payment to the unknown owner. The twins, benefiting from the 2-day rest as much as their mother, were alert and responsive, their tiny faces turning towards sounds and light in the way that had once seemed impossible during those desperate days in Sarah's cabin. The terrain grew increasingly challenging as they ascended into the foothills of the northern mountains. Lone Fox broke trail through deeper snow, the exertion evident in the set of his shoulders, but his pace never faltering. Sarah followed in his tracks, finding the going easier but still demanding. By midday of their 4th day of travel, they reached a high ridge that offered a sweeping view of the valley below. Lone Fox raised his hand, signaling a halt. "Look," he said simply, pointing toward the distant north. Sarah stepped carefully to his side, her breath catching at the vista spread before them. The valley stretched like a vast white bowl, rimmed by majestic mountains and bisected by a river that gleamed like polished silver in the winter sun. Near the center, barely visible at this distance, a thin column of smoke rose straight into the still air. "Oh, is that—" she began. "Yes," Lone Fox confirmed. "The place I spoke of, Valley of Many Smokes." Hope surged in Sarah's chest. "How much farther?" 2 days. Perhaps less if weather holds." He studied the sky with practiced eyes. "No storms coming soon." They made camp that night on the protected side of the ridge, their fire small but sufficient. As darkness fell, Sarah found herself more aware than ever of Lone Fox's presence beside her. Each movement, each quiet word seemed magnified in her consciousness, as if her senses had been heightened by their shared journey. The twins slept peacefully, growing stronger each day despite, or perhaps because of, the constant movement and fresh air. Sarah marveled at their resilience, these tiny beings who had come into the world amidst grief and rejection, yet thrived under the most unlikely circumstances. "They are strong like mother," Lone Fox observed, following her gaze to the sleeping infants. Sarah smiled, touched by the compliment. "And protected, like the children of your people," she replied. "The cradle boards have been a blessing I never knew existed." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled only by the quiet crackling of their fire and the occasional distant call of a night bird. After a while, Lone Fox spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "In Valley, there will be choices to make," he said. "My people, if they are there, will welcome you because of me. But life will be different from what you knew before." Sarah considered his words carefully. "Different doesn't frighten me anymore." she said finally. What frightens me is the thought of raising my children in a world of hatred, where they're taught to fear and despise others based on the color of their skin or the language they speak. Lone Fox's expression remained serious, but something like approval flickered in his eyes. There will still be dangers, he warned. Soldiers do not give up easily, neither do men like your sheriff. They're not my sheriff, Sarah corrected gently. Not anymore. She gazed into the fire, watching the flames dance and leap. I made my choice when I left that cabin. I chose freedom over safety, truth over comfortable lies. Her eyes lifted to meet his. I chose a path that honors what Thomas believed in, what he died for. And you do not regret? Lone Fox asked, his voice low, intimate in the darkness surrounding their small circle of light. Sarah thought of all she had left behind, the settlement with its neat rows of buildings, the church where she had once worshipped without question, the small comforts of community and civilization. None of it seemed to matter anymore, not when weighed against what she had found instead: courage within herself, a new understanding of the world, and a companion whose quiet strength had become her anchor in a storm-tossed sea. No, she said softly, the truth of it resonating deep within her. I don't regret. The look that passed between them then contained more than words could express, a recognition of how far they had come, not just in miles traveled, but in the journey of two souls, finding unexpected common ground. As they settled into sleep, the vast canopy of stars wheeling overhead, Sarah felt a sense of peace that had eluded her since Thomas's death. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own dangers, but for tonight, in this small sanctuary they had created, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future where her children might grow up knowing both strength and compassion, courage and wisdom, a future where the barriers between peoples might be bridged, one human connection at a time. The Valley of Many Smokes appeared before them like a painting come to life, its beauty more striking with each step of their descent. By late afternoon of their sixth day of travel, Sarah could make out individual lodges scattered in small clusters near the winding river, some conical tipis, others more rectangular structures that spoke of different tribal traditions. Thin columns of smoke rose from each dwelling, giving the valley its name and creating a scene of peaceful habitation that stood in stark contrast to the wilderness they had traversed. There, Lone Fox said, pointing to a grouping of lodges set slightly apart from the others. Apache. My people, if they have reached this place safely. Sarah noted the tension in his voice, hope tempered by caution, the fear of finding no one waiting, or worse, discovering that those he sought had met a violent end. She shifted Emma's weight against her back, the now familiar pressure of the cradle board having become almost a comfort during their journey. We'll know soon, she said softly, offering what reassurance she could. They continued downward along a trail that grew more defined as they approached the valley floor. The sun hung low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the snow and painting the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. Despite her exhaustion, Sarah felt a rising excitement that bordered on trepidation. What welcome would await them in this place? How would Lone Fox's people react to a white woman and her half-white children? As they neared the first cluster of dwellings, movement erupted through the camp. Women paused in their tasks, straightening to watch the approaching figures. Children stopped their play, wide-eyed with curiosity. Several men emerged from lodges, hands moving instinctively to weapons before recognition dawned on their faces. Lone Fox. The cry came from a young man who stepped forward, disbelief and joy mingling in his expression. You live! More voices joined the first, a chorus of Apache words that Sarah couldn't understand, but whose meaning was clear from the tone. Welcome, relief, celebration. Lone Fox raised his hand in greeting, his usually stoic face transformed by emotion. "Swift Arrow," he called back, "Greyhawk, Moon Dancer." He named each person as they gathered around, his voice growing stronger with each confirmation that those he had feared lost still lived. Then the crowd parted, and an elderly woman stepped forward. Her face was deeply lined, her hair white as the snow beneath their feet, but she moved with surprising grace. At the sight of her, Lone Fox stopped abruptly. "Grandmother," he said, the single word filled with reverence. The old woman approached slowly, her dark eyes taking in not just Lone Fox but Sarah and the cradle boards each of them carried. She spoke in Apache, her voice weathered but commanding. Lone Fox replied in their shared language, gesturing first to Sarah, then to each of the twins. The old woman listened intently, her gaze sharp and evaluating. When he finished speaking, she moved closer to Sarah, looking up into her face with unnerving directness. "I am Singing Bird," she said in surprisingly clear English. "Mother of Lone Fox's father, he tells me you are a brave woman. That you stood against your own people to protect my grandson." Sarah swallowed, intimidated by the elder's penetrating stare, but determined to meet it squarely. "He saved my children's lives," she replied simply, "and mine. I owe him everything." Singing Bird studied her for another long moment, then nodded once, decisively. "Come," she said, turning toward the Apache encampment. "Night falls soon. We have food, warm place for little ones." The simple acceptance in the old woman's invitation released a tension Sarah hadn't realized she'd been holding. As they followed Singing Bird toward the lodges, other members of the band fell in around them. Some curious, some wary, but none openly hostile. A young woman approached cautiously, her gaze fixed on the cradle board against Lone Fox's back. She spoke softly in Apache. "My sister, Meadow Lark," Lone Fox explained to Sarah. "She asks to help with babies." Sarah nodded, touched by the offer. With careful movements, Meadowlark helped remove the cradle boards, cradling James with practiced hands, while another woman assisted Sarah with Emma. The twins, awakened by the commotion, blinked in bewilderment at the new faces surrounding them. "Strong babies," Meadowlark commented, her English halting but clear. "A good spirit in them." They were led to a large teepee near the center of the Apache encampment. Inside, a fire burned in a central pit, its smoke rising through an opening at the peak. Furs and woven blankets covered the ground, creating a space that felt surprisingly warm and welcoming after days in the wilderness. As they settled near the fire, Sarah was struck by the easy efficiency with which she and the twins were incorporated into the life of the camp. Women brought food, a rich stew of game meat and wild roots that tasted better than anything Sarah could remember eating. Children peeked shyly into the lodge, giggling when Emma waved her tiny fists at them. Later, as the twins slept peacefully on a soft bed of furs, Lone Fox sat in council with the men of his band, sharing news of the cavalry's movements and the events that had separated him from his people. Sarah, though invited to remain in the women's circle, found herself drawn to the lodge entrance, where she could hear fragments of their discussion. "The Bluecoats still search," an older man was saying. "But 2 days ago, scouts saw them in the eastern foothills. They will not stop," Lone Fox replied grimly, "not until they believe all Apache are either on reservations or dead." "And the woman?" another voice asked. "The white woman you brought, will her people not search for her as well?" There was a pause before Lone Fox answered. "Her people abandoned her, left her and her newborn children to die in blizzard." His voice hardened. "But yes, some may search, not to rescue, but to punish." She defied their rules by accepting my help. Sarah's heart tightened at his words, at the simple truth of their situation. Both of them were fugitives in their own way, pursued by those who saw their alliance as a threat to the established order. Singing Bird's voice joined the conversation, her tone authoritative despite her age. "The woman and her children stay with us," she declared. "They are under our protection now." The spirits guided Lone Fox to her cabin for a purpose. Murmurs of agreement followed this pronouncement, though Sarah sensed not everyone was equally convinced. She withdrew quietly, returning to the sleeping twins and the circle of women who had welcomed her with surprising acceptance. "They will protect you," said a soft voice beside her. Sarah turned to find Meadowlark settling nearby, a bundle of herbs in her lap that she was methodically sorting. "My brother has claimed responsibility for your safety. This makes you and the little ones family." "Thank you," Sarah replied, emotion thickening her voice. "I didn't expect such kindness." Meadowlark smiled slightly. "Apache know what it means to lose home, to be hunted. We do not turn away those in need." She hesitated, then added, "But it will not be easy path. Some here fear bringing white woman will lead soldiers to us." "I understand," Sarah said, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "If my presence endangers anyone, I'll leave. That is why they trust you," came another voice, Singing Bird, who had entered the lodge silently. "Do you think of others before yourself?" The old woman lowered herself to a sitting position with the careful movements of age. "Like my grandson." Sarah felt a flush rise to her cheeks at the implied comparison. "Lone Fox has shown me kindness I never expected," she admitted. "He could have left us to die, and no one would have blamed him, given how his people have been treated." Singing Bird's wrinkled face creased in a knowing smile. "There is more than kindness in his eyes when he looks at you. I have lived many winters. I know these things." Before Sarah could respond to this startling observation, commotion erupted outside the lodge. Voices called out in alarm, followed by the pounding of feet on packed snow. Lone Fox appeared at the entrance, his expression tense. "Riders approaching from the south," he announced. "Many riders." Fear clutched at Sarah's heart. "The cavalry?" "No. Men from settlements, 15, maybe 20. His dark eyes met hers. "Sheriff Wilson leads them." Panic threatened to overwhelm her. "How? How did they find us so quickly?" "Does not matter now," Lone Fox replied grimly. "They come with torches, with rifles. They come for blood." Around them, the camp had erupted into organized chaos, women gathering children, men retrieving weapons, elders directing the most vulnerable toward escape routes that had clearly been planned in advance. "We must go," Meadowlark urged, already gathering the twins. "There is hidden path through Western Ravine." But Sarah stood rooted, a terrible clarity washing over her. "No," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. This is because of me. I won't let your people suffer for sheltering us." "Sarah," Lone Fox began, but she cut him off with a determined shake of her head. "I'm going to talk to them," she declared. "Wilson is a bully and a coward, but he's also a public official. He won't shoot an unarmed woman in front of witnesses, especially when those witnesses include men from neighboring settlements who might not share Rivercrest's particular hatreds." "You cannot know this," Lone Fox argued, real fear showing in his eyes for the first time since she had known him. "I knew these men before they decided I was their enemy," Sarah countered. "They're not soldiers following orders. They're shopkeepers and farmers who've been whipped into a frenzy by men like Reverend Paulson and Sheriff Wilson." She took a deep breath. "Let me try. If I fail, then we run." Singing Bird had been watching this exchange in silence. Now she spoke, her voice carrying surprising authority. The woman speaks with wisdom. Sometimes facing enemy is only path. She turned to Lone Fox. We prepare our people for escape, but give her chance. For a moment, it seemed Lone Fox would refuse. Then, with visible reluctance, he nodded. I will be near, he told Sarah, the intensity of his gaze conveying far more than his words. At first sign of danger, you come back. Sarah nodded, her throat too tight for speech. She kissed each of her sleeping twins, entrusting them to Meadow Lark's care, then straightened her shoulders and walked toward the edge of the camp, where several Apache men had positioned themselves as sentries. The approaching riders were visible now in the fading light, a ragged line of men on horseback, some carrying torches that burned orange against the deepening blue of evening. At their head rode Sheriff Wilson, his substantial figure unmistakable even at a distance. Sarah moved past the Apache sentries, ignoring their concerned glances. She walked onto open ground, deliberately placing herself between the approaching riders and the camp. The snow crunched beneath her boots, Thomas's old boots, which she had taken from the cabin, now broken in by days of hard travel. That's far enough, she called when the riders were within earshot. Her voice carried across the still evening air, stronger than she had expected. The line of horsemen faltered, clearly surprised to see a lone woman confronting them. Sheriff Wilson raised his hand, signaling a halt. Sarah Blackwood, he called back, spurring his horse a few paces forward. Step aside. We've come for that Apache buck and any others harboring him. No, Sarah replied simply, planting her feet more firmly in the snow. You've come to commit murder, Sheriff. I can't let you do that. Wilson's face contorted with anger. That savage has bewitched you, woman. These heathens killed the Henderson family, stole Peterson's cattle, and now they've corrupted you with their savage ways. You're wrong, Sarah shot back. No, the Apache didn't kill the Hendersons. It was white men dressed as Indians, the same men who murdered my husband when he threatened to expose them. A murmur ran through the assembled riders. Not everyone had expected this confrontation, this resistance from a woman they had written off as either victim or traitor. She's lying, Wilson snarled. Thomas Blackwood was killed by bandits. Was he? Sarah demanded, taking a step forward. Her fear had burned away, replaced by a righteous anger that had been building since the day they had laid Thomas in the frozen ground with barely a prayer. Then where were the valuables taken? Why was nothing stolen except his life? And why were you so quick to silence anyone who asked questions? More muttering among the riders. Sarah recognized Davis from the general store, looking distinctly uncomfortable. The Burkett brothers sat straight-backed on their horses, hands near their weapons, but expressions uncertain. Several men she didn't recognize, likely from neighboring settlements, exchanged glances that suggested they hadn't heard this version of events before. This is seditious talk, Wilson blustered, but his bluff lacked conviction. The truth isn't sedition, Sheriff, Sarah countered. The truth is that my husband was murdered for speaking out against the mistreatment of the Apache people. The truth is that you and the town council left me and my newborn twins to die in that blizzard because you feared what Thomas stood for would live on through us. She swept her gaze across the assembled men, making eye contact with as many as possible. And the truth is that the man you've come to kill, the savage you're hunting, is the one who saved our lives when my so-called Christian neighbors abandoned us to freeze to death. A heavy silence fell across the snowy expanse. In that silence, Sarah became aware of movement behind her. Lone Fox had emerged from the camp, unarmed but standing tall. his presence a silent affirmation of her words. One of the unknown riders, an older man with a graying beard and the weathered look of a longtime rancher, spoke up. "Wilson, you said this was about bringing murderers to justice. You didn't say anything about a woman and babies being left to die. Or about a man being killed for his political opinions," added another rider, this one younger, with the look of an educated man, perhaps a teacher or clerk from one of the neighboring settlements. Wilson's face had darkened to a dangerous shade. "These are Apache sympathizers," he snapped. "Traitors to their race. Would you take their word over mine?" "I'd take truth over lies, no matter who speaks it," the older rancher replied steadily. "And I'm starting to wonder which I've been hearing from you." Sarah felt Lone Fox step beside her, his presence a steadying force. "These people have offered shelter to me and my children when our own community cast us out," she said, her voice carrying clear in the stillness. "They've shared their food, their knowledge, their protection, asking nothing in return except the same respect they've shown us. And now you would lead an armed mob against a camp with children," Lone Fox added, speaking directly to the riders for the first time. "This is what you call civilization. This is what makes you superior." His words, delivered without heat but with unmistakable moral force, seemed to strike home with several of the men. The young, educated rider actually removed his hat, a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. "I didn't sign on for killing women and children, white or Indian," declared one of the men from the back of the group. "Don't count me out, Wilson." He wheeled his horse around and began riding back the way they had come. "Coward!" Wilson shouted after him, but his authority was visibly crumbling. More riders exchanged uncertain glances, clearly reassessing their participation in what had been presented to them as a righteous mission of justice. The older rancher nudged his horse forward until he was alongside Wilson. "I think we've been misled about the nature of this expedition," he said loudly enough for all to hear. "I suggest we return to our homes and consider carefully what we've learned here today." "You can't be serious, Hammond," Wilson growled. "These savages have shown more humanity than some who claim to be civilized," Hammond interrupted firmly. "I've heard enough. Anyone who wishes to join me in returning home is welcome." He turned his horse, deliberately presenting his back to the sheriff. One by one, riders began to fall in behind Hammond. Davis went first, not meeting Sarah's eyes as he passed. The Burkett brothers hesitated, then followed. Within minutes, only Wilson and 3 others remained, men known for their violent tendencies and blind loyalty to the sheriff. "This isn't over," Wilson promised, hatred distorting his features, "not by a long shot." "For tonight, it is," Sarah replied steadily. "Go home, Sheriff. There will be no blood on your hands today." For one tense moment, it seemed Wilson might order his remaining men to attack anyway. Then, with a savage jerk on his reins, he wheeled his horse around. "You're dead to Rivercrest, Sarah Blackwood," he spat. "You and those half-breed bastards you call children." The words were meant to wound, but Sarah felt only a profound relief as Wilson and his remaining followers galloped away, their torches receding into the gathering darkness like malevolent fireflies. Only when they had disappeared from sight did she allow her knees to buckle, the tension of the confrontation draining her remaining strength. Lone Fox caught her before she could fall, his arms steady around her shoulders. "You have courage of warrior," he said softly, genuine admiration in his voice. "I was terrified," she confessed, leaning against him without shame. "Courage is not absence of fear," he replied, "is action despite fear." They turned back toward the camp, where the Apache had emerged from their defensive positions. Singing Bird stood at the front, the twins now cradled in her ancient arms, Meadowlark hovering protectively nearby. "It is as I said," the old woman announced as they approached. "The spirits guided you together for purpose. Today, words prevented bloodshed. Tomorrow, perhaps they will build bridge where there was only hatred before." Sarah took Emma from the elder's arms, while Lone Fox gently lifted James. Standing together, the four of them formed a tableau that would have been unimaginable mere weeks ago. A white woman, an Apache warrior, and two infants of mixed heritage, united not by blood, but by choice, by the human connections that transcended the artificial boundaries of race and culture. "What happens now?" Sarah asked softly, looking up at Lone Fox. His expression softened as he gazed down at the child in his arms. "And now we live," he said simply. "We teach these little ones better way than hatred. We show by example that different peoples can find common ground. It won't be easy," she cautioned, thinking of Wilson's parting threat, of the cavalry that still hunted the Apache, of the long shadows cast by generations of conflict and misunderstanding. "No," Lone Fox agreed. "But worth fighting for." His free hand found hers, fingers intertwining in a gesture that spoke of a bond deeper than words could express. Some fights are won with weapons, others with courage, with truth, with love. As they walked back to the lodge that would shelter them through the night, Sarah felt a peace settle over her that had nothing to do with the absence of immediate danger. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with challenges she could only dimly foresee, but she was no longer alone in facing them. In the weeks and months that followed, word spread through the territories of the Valley of Many Smokes, a place where Apache and Shoshone, Blackfoot and Crow lived alongside a handful of white trappers and traders who had rejected the hatreds of their society. A place where a white woman raised her children among the people her husband had died defending. A place where an Apache warrior called Lone Fox had found a new purpose as protector and provider for a family bound not by blood, but by something stronger. Some called it a scandal, others a curiosity. But to those who came seeking refuge from a world divided by fear and prejudice, it was something far more precious, proof that even in the harshest winter, the most unexpected warmth could take root and flourish, if only given the chance. And in years to come, when Emma and James Blackwood had grown old enough to understand the extraordinary circumstances of their survival, they would tell their own children the story that had become legend, of a blizzard that had nearly claimed their lives, and of two people from different worlds who had defied hatred to create something new and precious from the ashes of loss. A story that began with abandonment and ended with belonging. A story of courage in the face of prejudice, of humanity discovered in the most inhospitable wilderness. A story that would be retold, generation after generation, long after the snow had melted from Sarah's abandoned cabin and new flowers had bloomed in the Valley of Many Smokes. A story of hope.